I'm gonna get this out of the way first. I have something on my face. I don't know what it is. It's an allergic reaction of some kind, but it's here. I don't know what this is. I'm not gonna cover it up, A, because I don't want to irritate my skin any more than it is, and B, I don't care. I was wearing a Band-Aid on it yesterday and I looked ridiculous, so I'm just gonna leave it like this. This is video number 2 that I've had to re-record actually, because I messed up my first recording session. See my last video that I just made on A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, where I had to re-record the whole thing because I messed up. But I've gone through my checklist. I just did all my checks. That light is on. This light is on. I just did my thumbnail. We're ready to go. No one is catching me slipping today. Hello, welcome back. It is a new day, a new sleigh, and a new video where I have something to say. And personally, I can't focus on what I have to say because I have this on my face. It's fine. I will live. It's really not that big of a deal. This book that I wanted to discuss today, I was actually going to do a review of the movie, but right now, oh my God, I had such issues uploading my reaction video to Heartstopper. Literally, oh my God, I took a screenshot. They were trying to have me cut out like almost the entirety of the video. And they're like, sure, yeah, you can upload 5 minutes of your reaction that was originally 20 for sure. That's not copyrighted. Go ahead. They even put like the copyright on a section where it's literally just my face on the screen and like just me speaking. Like you can't even hear the audio of the actual show. And they're like, no, that's copyrighted. I'm like, bitch, me? But anyway, I was going to review the movie, but I have to figure out a way to get around all that and to prove to them that I'm doing it for the right purposes. So I am actually just going to review the book today. But don't worry, I am reading articles, looking at tutorials and other tips from other YouTubers. So I will figure it out eventually, because I cannot review books and then ignore their TV adaptations. It's just such a disservice. Like it or not, I'm making it a part of my brand. That's what we do here as of now. So without further ado, today we will be discussing Me and Earl and the Dying Girl by Jessie Andrews. Sorry. Why is my book dirty? Is this stupid to use condensation from my cup to try and wash a book cover? If it's stupid but it works, then it's not stupid. Honestly, it's such a Mandela effect for me because this book came out a while ago, and I remember when all the like OG booktubers would talk about this book, they all referenced it as Me, Earl, and the Dying Girl, but there's an extra and in there. It's Me and Earl and the Dying Girl. I feel like we could have put like an Oxford comma here, and it would have really helped the fluidity of the title, but that's neither here nor there. As I mentioned, this was adapted into a movie that honestly got really good reviews, which I'm so sad that I'm not going to be able to watch it, but we'll see if that changes in the future. Putting that aside, as a spoiler-free summary, Me, Earl, and the Dying Girl is about our main character, Greg Gaines. Greg is a senior in high school, and during his senior year, he finds out that one of his old childhood friends has been diagnosed with leukemia. So Rachel and Greg met when they were attending like Jewish Sunday school, I believe. There's probably a better word for that. I apologize. They had a friendship while they were going to that school, but it kind of like died out because Greg never wanted to hang out with Rachel. He was like not the best person as a kid, but I mean, are any of us really? So now his mom has arranged for him to kind of have a friendship with Rachel as she spends the last of her days on Earth, which is really sad. Rachel was diagnosed with acute leukemia, and they specify in the book that the reason it's acute is just that it presented like so quickly and the disease is rapidly taking over her body. So the book follows them and their friendship endeavors as they spend their very last time together. Greg eventually introduces Rachel to his friend Earl, and that's how this friendship, this trio dynamic grows throughout the book. Now, notably, it is extremely short. I think the audiobook was only like 6 hours, which is a record for me. Prior to this, the shortest audiobook I'd ever listened to was The Bluest Eye, and it was 7 hours. So this is a quick read. I also found out because I was looking for the author to see if they had like an Instagram account. He wrote Luca, Luca, the gay fish from Italy. He wrote that. So I was like, oh my God, okay. And the reason I also looked it up was because I started the book and I didn't like it. So I was like, I have to be like wrong because so many people loved this book. I just have to be dumb, right? Like there's just something I'm missing and that's why I don't like it. So that's why I looked him up. That was the end of the spoiler-free section. So going forward, we will be discussing the actual plot and ending of the book. Spoilers ahead. So if you don't want to know, please click off the video now. If you don't care, continue on. I'm gonna get into it a little bit right now. I'm gonna go into why specifically I wasn't vibing with the book, and it's purely just like stylistically. So I listened to the audiobook while I was reading the book, and one of the things that like didn't translate well for me personally, and something that I didn't like, was that a lot of the dialogue is delivered through like script format, like movie script, TV script, where it's like character name, semicolon, whatever they say. Personally, me, I'm someone that enjoys like the flowery language. I like those dialogue tags. I don't like that especially like in the audiobook, because it's like a secondary narrator that will say those like script parts, and then there's different voice actors that have different roles based on the characters. Like I felt like I was at a table read for the filming of the actual movie version of this book. My reading experience, I didn't like it. Again, this is like purely stylistic. That's not to say that it's objectively bad or objectively good. It just wasn't to my taste, and it was really hard for me to like get into the book also. And that's a big reason also why it's such a fast read, because it doesn't have like really heavy dialogue or those like dialogue tags, narration. It's a lot of script based. Also stylistically, Greg is in the nicest way possible an edgelord. He's just like super edgy, and that's his like shtick. That's what makes him funny, where he's like the person that always needs to make people laugh, or he's like, he always has to get a laugh to get that self-validation, which I kind of get, because I'm like, I feel like I'm a funny person, and I feel like I subconsciously do the same things, and call me crazy, call me stupid, but I feel like there's a time and place for a lot of that stuff.
Oh my God. Time and place. And you did it at my birthday dinner.
So a lot of the jokes are very like edgelordy, and just like, for example, Earl's character, the way he's written is that like he has these like tangents that he goes on where he just tries to be like as crude and explicit as possible, like literally cussing, which me personally, I cuss. I really do. I have to heavily censor myself for these videos, but I do. Occasionally, I've been known to cuss kind of frequently in sentences in which I'm very passionate about. And for me, some of the things that he was saying felt a little overkill. I was like, okay, we lost the point where this was funny, and now I just feel like if someone asked me if I actually read this and enjoyed this, I would be a little embarrassed to say yes, which is, again, a stylistic choice. They're seniors in high school. That good old frontal lobe has not been fully developed yet. So I will give the benefit of the doubt. Right at the beginning of the book, they give us a note from Greg, aka the author of this book, saying like, oh, this is not gonna be like your inspirational story. Like in the subtext kind of saying like, if you're looking for the Fault in Our Stars in this book, you're not gonna find it. Just because Rachel has leukemia doesn't mean that she's spouting Shakespeare or these like, you know, quotes that you can have tattooed on your body. Rachel is not in the middle of getting chemo and saying like, maybe okay will be our always. That's not who she is, and that's not what the story is trying to be. So I think in trying to really separate itself from the Fault in Our Stars and that like manic pixie dream girl aesthetic that surrounds that entire book, it became like edgelord. Everything is just like really like, oh my God, I bet you weren't expecting these people to do that or say that.
Sucking dick and cock.
And then it's like, whoa. Like these two books are on opposite ends of the spectrum, truly. Because personally, The Fault in Our Stars, like, it's okay. It's not my favorite book. I read it in a day when I was probably like 13. I don't know when the book came out. I also don't particularly like John Green novels. I know, sue me. But it's because I blame him for the rise of the manic pixie dream girl. Every single book he's written, I swear to God, has a manic pixie dream girl. Looking for Alaska, Paper Towns, The Fault in Our Stars. I had enough. I also just associate him so heavily with the Tumblr aesthetic, that being like all his freaking book quotes in a galaxy, and it's just like a fade. Oh my God. I'm so glad to be out of that era. You could not drag me back to that era. This book aims to be a little bit more raw about the concept of terminal illnesses and like what that means, especially to teenagers, how that can impact your life. You know, it's supposed to be very like honest, brutally honest in a way, which I'm not going to say is good or bad, and I won't say that the execution is good or bad. It just wasn't to my taste. There were some parts of the book that I really did like. For one, Greg's character arc is very like gradual, very slow, and very subtle, and you don't really realize how much he's changed until the very end of the book, and that I really liked. I was like, okay, I can kind of get down with this. Whereas at the beginning of the book, he's like your typical high school kid that has never experienced the warm embrace of a woman, and yet is simultaneously obsessed, constantly chasing the high of a woman's embrace. Like, that was his whole reason that he had a friendship with Rachel, was because he was trying to like make this other girl jealous, again at the ripe age of like what, 13. He was trying to make this other girl jealous, so he was like, I'm gonna befriend Rachel. But then the other girl was like, oh my god, you two look so cute together, and he was like, I'm actually gonna vomit. So even though they had like a pretty genuine friendship, he was like, well, I am not interested in you romantically, so therefore we can no longer associate with each other. And at first, when he's starting to hang out with Rachel in his inner monologue, he makes it very evident that he's not doing it because he wants to, but because his mother told him to. Greg is just the epitome of like a horny teen, which is like, okay, valid, yeah, like I get it, teenagers can be like that, but I'm like also like at the beginning of the book, when he finds out that Rachel has cancer, his mom comes to tell him, right? And she opens his laptop so they can look up what leukemia is, and he's literally looking at a picture of boobs. And then for comedic value, his mom is like, you know, those aren't natural. A woman's boobs don't look like that. And it's like, okay, haha, funny, but also like, come on, a boob joke. In terms of all the possible jokes, it's low-hanging fruit. Like, come on. But then as the story progresses, he's spending more and more time with Rachel, and we see that like most of his interactions are based on him trying to make her laugh, which is something that he's very good at. You know, he's funny and she enjoys his humor, which is good, which is fine. And then kind of against his will, because at the beginning of the book we see that like his whole personality is based on like being friendly acquaintances with everyone, but belonging to no actual friend groups. Just laying low in all ways possible and not aligning himself or making any actual friends other than Earl. So once he starts hanging out with Rachel, she kind of like adopts him in the same way an extrovert adopts an introvert, and she introduces him to all of her friends, including this other girl, I think her name was Madison. Madison was also someone that Greg was really into, and his whole experience with her, he makes it seem as though he's like really trying to like get on her good side and make it seem that he's a good person. In a way, his character arc is really defined by that mentality, where he's like convincing other people that he's a good person while he himself doesn't believe he is. It's the epitome of what, like, there's like so many like ironically Tumblr posts that I've seen where people are like, I'm convinced I'm not a good person, I'm just really good at manipulating other people to thinking I'm a good person. So that's kind of like Greg. Like, he's really convinced himself that he's only hanging out with Rachel because his mom told him to and because she has leukemia, and not because he's actually genuinely a good person, which he kind of is. Greg is also a filmmaker. That's his like personality trait. That's his passion. He likes making films with his best friend Earl. But the whole thing is that he thinks that all his films are like really bad, so he's never shown them to anyone other than his parents. So we kind of see his character arc throughout the book, especially when Rachel starts getting more sick and she has to stop going to school so that she can get chemo. But at some point, Earl is actually the one that gives Rachel the films so that she can watch them. And at first, Greg is super upset at Earl for doing this, and he actually goes to his house and he's like, we're not working together anymore, this is so unprofessional, how dare you show Rachel our films? And Earl actually beats him up because his whole thing is like, are you really focusing on that right now? Like, there's so many other important things. That girl is sitting in a hospital room dying, and you're over here, like, for lack of a better term, bitching about these films. Like, relax, dude. So from that point on, we see a character arc from Greg, because first it starts with, you know, her watching the films, and then at some point Madison tells him that he should make a film for her. So Greg and Earl together make a variety of different films, all in different styles, formats, all with the goal of trying to make a film that encompasses Rachel as a person. What we see about Greg as he is filming this movie is not only his need for like perfection, but also how it relates to his relationship with Rachel. He wants to make a good movie for her. He wants to completely encompass who she is as a person. But then we also see, we kind of like dig a little bit more into Greg as we find out that the purpose of his film, what he's trying to do by making it, is to encourage Rachel to keep fighting. Because with Rachel's leukemia, and the reason that it's specified as being acute is that it's very quickly progressing through her body and taking its toll on her. Honestly, there are some like pretty good scenes, and there was one that I think I bookmarked, or at the very least I highlighted it. So at one point they decide that they'll do like a documentary, so they film interviews with Rachel's family, and they specifically interview her mom. And at the start of the book, she's like super energetic, she's really fun, but then the next time that we talk to her is through this interview, and we see like a completely like different side of this character. Greg is interviewing Denise, asking her about Rachel's birth, and she says, "Rachel's birth, what an ordeal. She was never much of a fighter. She's always been a quiet girl, just so sweet, never wanting to fight. And now I don't know what to do. I can't make her fight, Greg. I raised a girl who's sweet and lovely, but not tough." And that's what I'm saying, like a lot of this book, especially like towards the end, like when you look past all the like weird, edgelord kind of stuff and all like that, cringy. I'm sorry, the teenage experience is just inherently cringy. Once you get past all of that, you see these like nuggets of just like real human raw emotion, which is what this book intended from the very beginning, to be more realistic, not necessarily like super hopeful or trying inherently to be inspiring, but just showing the realities of what an illness can do to a person and their loved ones. So Greg, I think he goes through like 5 different iterations of this movie, all with the purpose of trying to rally Rachel's spirits and, give her the strength to fight her illness. But even though they finish making the movie, and even though they do show it to Rachel, she still decides to stop chemo since it's not really helping her or curing her illness in any way, and they decide to just continue on with the rest of her life. And the reason I will say that this is definitely much more like raw and realistic compared to books like The Fault in Our Stars is because when the school finds out that Greg and Earl have made this movie, they're like, we're gonna show it to the whole school because you guys are so inspiring. Rachel is so inspiring. We're gonna do it. We're gonna hold this whole rally and everything's gonna be great. And then they watch the movie and it's not received in any kind of good way. Everyone's like, you're so interesting in the way you think, Greg. So of course on the surface when you look at that, it's just meant to be like, oh yeah, Greg is like an awkward teenage kid and like he's really embarrassed by this whole ordeal. But it's also meant to show that like, especially the adults in this situation are portraying it as him being so like giving and just like a very kind person. But the reality is that he made that movie for a much more selfish reason. He did hold some resentment and anger towards Rachel for not having the strength to fight off her illness. And you realize that he's also not able to completely capture all his ideas in this movie because he's only known Rachel from the start of their senior year when she was diagnosed till that point. So it's only been months. So it just makes you even more sad to think that he wasted all that time not knowing her, and the only time that he spent actually knowing her, it's not as substantial as it could be. Towards the end of the book, when Rachel is hospitalized for pneumonia, Greg is very distraught. He's like ugly crying, for a lack of a better term, over her bedside, just very heartbroken about the whole ordeal, which is completely different from when we saw him at the start of the book. He's never shown that it would impact him directly if and when Rachel dies. So we see like a complete turn because he has been convincing himself as well as the reader that the only reason he's hanging out with Rachel is because his mom made him and that he doesn't have any real stake in whether she lives or dies. But in this section, it's like very raw and real for him. So he says, "At the same time, and I hated myself for this, I was realizing how to make the movie I should have made, that it had to be something that stored as much of Rachel as possible, that ideally we would have had a camera on her for her whole life, and one inside her head. And it made me so bitter and fucking angry that this was impossible and she was just going to be lost. Just as if she had never been around to say things and laugh at people and have favorite words that she liked to use and ways of fidgeting with her fingers when she got antsy and specific memories that flashed through her head when she ate a certain food or smelled a certain smell, like, I don't know, how maybe honeysuckle made her think of one particular summer day playing with a friend or whatever the fuck, or how rain on the windshield of her mom's car used to look like alien fingers to her her or whatever. And as if she had never had fantasies about stupid Hugh Jackman or visions of what her life was going to be like in college, or a whole unique way of thinking about the world that was never going to be articulated to anyone. All of it and everything else she had ever thought was just going to be lost. After that moment, Rachel does eventually die at the end of the book, and I kind of like the fact that we don't necessarily linger on her specifically. Greg is not there when she actually dies, and we don't necessarily focus on the funeral. And we revisit Greg after Rachel has passed away, and he's talking to Earl and saying that, you know, they should definitely try out for film school because it's what Rachel would have wanted. And what I really liked about this specific part and what Earl has to say is that he's really real, which I know I'm kind of saying a lot, but it really encompasses everything. And honestly, Earl is like meant to be like quote unquote the moral compass, and I don't like a lot of the stuff that he says. He's a character in every sense of the word, definitely. But this is like his one like nugget. I mean, I guess it's not his one. He does have his moments. He had some stuff to say. He says, "I hate to get on you for this. I'm not getting on you for this, but I'm just telling you, this is the first negative thing that happened to you in your life, and you can't be overreacting to it and making big ass expensive decisions based on it. I'm just saying, people die. Other people do stupid shit. I'm surrounded by family members doing stupid shit. I used to think I had to do shit for them. I still want to do shit for them, but you gotta live your own life. You gotta take care of your own shit before you get started doing things for everybody else." He's kind of calling out Greg and really forcing him to think about the decisions he's making after Rachel has died. Because in a way, Greg is kind of using what happened to her and its effect on his life to make his own decisions, you know, with his future. And what this paragraph, and why I like specifically like remember it even after finishing the book weeks later, it almost forces us to think about the decisions we make just because a person has died. Because before this, when Rachel was still alive, Greg had not intended on going to film school at all. He was just going to go to like a community college. So he's not making this decision because he necessarily wants to, but because he feels like he has to in order to respect Rachel's memory. And it calls into question why we only do certain things after a person has died. For example, like you can even think like with artists, why do we only appreciate their art after they die? Or like, for example, when celebrities die and suddenly everyone's like, oh my God, you changed my life. I love you so much. I am going to rewatch all of your TV shows because they were absolutely my favorite, but you never thought about that person prior to this event. So in a way, it kind of forces us as the reader, as well as Greg, to really look at ourselves and think about like the choices we're making and if they're actually true to who we are. So I will say this book definitely doesn't pull any punches. It's very direct in its message. And it doesn't have a happy ending. I mean, Greg is about to get kicked out of school, so he writes all of this down, and his kind of purpose is like to try and reason with the school board and say like, hey, I went through this thing, please don't kick me out of school. But even in his like last notes to the school, he's like, I don't care, I will get through it, it's fine. He's not really too hell-bent on trying to get back into the school, but more so just like talking about Rachel. And we really see him kind of like rejecting using Rachel as like an excuse for the things he's going through, and honestly taking ownership of his own choices and decisions in his life. I read this book, I think I finished reading it like 3 weeks ago, and I was gonna record it almost immediately after I finished, and then I was like, I have nothing intelligent to say. Then I recorded it the last time, but there was an issue with my camera, or no, not my camera, my microphone, and now upon like after all this time is when I actually get it. So maybe it was a good thing. I don't think my last video I tried recording was as good as the one I just did. So with that being said, I think that's the end of the video. I think my rating is probably going to be a little bit higher than it was the last time I reviewed the book. Again, there are parts of the book that I don't like, and again, it's very stylistic. Also, side note, this is going to be, I'm going to get on my little soapbox here. Let me step on up here. I'm going to get on my soapbox. I hate this era of when these kinds of books were coming out, and I blame John Green for romanticizing children, literal teenagers, smoking cigarettes. Oh my God, why were there smoking in every single book that he wrote? John Green, why do you make these children smoke? It doesn't make them look cool. It's not like a cute, quirky trait. It's not Manic Pixie Dream Girl. Get out of here. In this book, it's like a funny hee hee ha ha thing that Earl is like a smoker and no one tries to stop him because they're like, at least he's not doing like hard drugs. He's only smoking. smoking. I hate that. And it's supposed to be like, oh yeah, he comes from like a hard background and you know, he's been toughened by the years, but Jesus Christ, why is it always smoking? You know, someone can be hardened by the situation that they're in and not smoke. Why are we giving vices to 17-year-olds? Your vice should be accidentally using your parents' credit card number to buy Robux. It should not be literally smoking. So that's a beef that I have. I literally hate when books do that. I don't understand it. I don't get why. I just hate it. I hate it so much and I could really do without it. Also, in this book, and again, very dated, very like interesting. All the characters are Jewish in this book, which is cool, which is fine. Apparently, Greg's mother is from a country that you could really actually say doesn't exist. I might venture and say that it is a country that is not real, if you catch my drift. So I was like, oh no. I could have really done without it. If they ever decide to like reprint the book, I would love if that was edited out. That would be perfect for me personally. I'm gonna give this a 3 out of 5. And the only reason that I'm really mixed is because I do like the more real portrayals and I do understand what we were trying to achieve and what we did achieve for the most part. Stylistically, I don't like the script. I get it, he's a film person. Hee hee ha ha. I don't like it. I like my good old fashioned dialogue tags. And I can't get past, like, this book is very dated. It is very much written in the 2010s. And I can't go back. I can't do it. I'm sorry. It did, you know, achieve its goal of being the antithesis of The Fault in Our Stars, so I'll give it points for that. Again, this book just probably wasn't for me. This is another instance in which I'm probably too old to enjoy it. But whatever, which is kind of crazy to say because I'm 23. I don't feel like that's that old, but you know, maybe it is. But anyway, that is the end of the video. This author does have an Instagram account. I don't think he's very active on that Instagram account. Read Me, Earl, and the Dying Girl. I refuse to say that extra and. I like some good old fashioned punctuation and commas. So feel free to pick this up. Again, it's been out for forever. This is such like an old classic. I do like the style of the cover. I don't know if you can see that. I do like this style. I kind of like it. They did Rachel kind of dirty. But yeah, you can feel free to read this book. There is a movie, so if you want to watch that, you can. Feel free to also follow me on all my social media at Variations of Listen to Kristen on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. The next book I will be reviewing, if everything goes to schedule, which I hope it does, should be It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover, in which I will be trying to do the most objective literary analysis of the book to decide once and for all if it's actually a bad book or if it's just problematic, which personally, I don't separate the two. If it's problematic, it's bad. I really don't separate. I don't make that distinction, but so many people are like, blah, 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 blah. So I'm just going to do my official literary analysis and see what happens. But anyway, that's the end of the video. I have recorded this in record time. I think I only did an hour, which is kind of good for me. I'm liking this. Anyway, that is the end of the video. I will see you next time. Thank you. Ew.